Hello, I'm Leigh Harrington. I'm in Davis, California, and I am so delighted to talk with you, Daniel, about your book, The Tropic of Cancer.
Oh, I am delighted to be chatting with you, Leigh. Thank you for reading my book and looking forward to chatting about it with you.
Yeah, I enjoyed so many pieces of it. It's chock full of history and science and heart and soul. And I couldn't imagine it being any better. So it's so fantastic. I have a few questions that, we can use kind of as talking points, and we might have other things that we come upon as well. I noticed at the, as the opening of your book is dedicated to your sister, Nancy, who you said is your sister, your co-conspirator, and your friend. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about her.
Nancy is my older sister. I have, let's see, 4 younger sisters as well, at last count. And she and I grew up together, spent a lot of time hanging out. And then as we became adults, we noticed that our interests lie in many of the same directions. We're peas in a pod when it comes to spirituality. We're both poets, and we're both passionately interested in the happiness of all beings. Nancy has worked for more than 40 years with a couple of nonprofit organizations that she founded in Southern California. The Inner City Law Center was her first program, and she's now running the Uncommon Good, which is service and justice organization in the Pomona Valley in California. And our professional paths crossed earlier this year when we brought a low-intensity CBT program on board there. Uncommon Good and All Things CBT are the co-sponsors of the program. And our lay therapists are now up and running, seeing clients there in the Pomona Valley. So Nancy and I have traveled many of the same paths over time. And I wanted to acknowledge that by dedicating the book to her.
Wow, what a lovely gesture and lovely, amazing connection. It sounds like she's as fantastic as you are.
Nancy always got straight A's. And so I grew up thinking I was kind of slow because I never got straight A's. I got A's, B's. If we factor in math, C's. I think I got a D+ in algebra in high school. So I was a bit awestruck by Nancy's intellect. And it wasn't until years later I realized, no, I'm smart enough. It's just that she's super smart.
Sounds like she's super smart and with a super amazing heart.
Yeah, I think Nancy would agree that being wise, being kind, and being smart, at the end of the day, point to one thing.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned in the book a reference to the mostly clean air of my California childhood. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So when I was born in the 1950s, smog was not really a thing yet. But as I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, it became a big thing. And I think it's improved quite a bit since I was in high school in the 70s. But I remember running track and cross country and my lungs hurting for hours afterwards from breathing in all of those pollutants. So one of the themes of the book is the interface between our environmental wellness and our individual wellness. And what I hope to point to in the book is the fact that these are not separate. They're distinct. We're measuring air pollution, or later on, those radionuclides that drifted over from the atmospheric testing in Nevada when I was growing up. And of course, Agent Orange was being sprayed as weed control in the military bases there in California when I was a kid. So I wanted to notice how the skyrocketing rates of cancer in the world today track quite precisely the increased rates in these carcinogens that are in our air, in our water, in the food that we eat. And so the mostly clean air when I was in grade school became less and less clean over time. And during that time, organ cancer rates tracked almost precisely those changes in environmental health.
Yeah. You have a lot of data and history, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the research that went into writing this book. More knowledge about these chemical carcinogens in the air, water, land around, as well as so many areas that seem perfectly researched. It's incredibly researched. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. How you were inspired. Was it just kind of natural that you had already researched all these areas, or how you decided kind of all of the areas to research? Because there's so much. I felt like it was a great textbook, as well as in terms of learning life, history and science, as well as a personal journey.
In my 20s, I worked as an investigative journalist. So I had a lot of training in getting information, sometimes information that was not so readily available in the mainstream press. So this was before the internet, and investigative journalism started down at the public library in the card stacks and looking up those volumes of periodical literature and copying them on Xerox machines and taking them home, and then starting to call people to arrange interviews and site visits and that kind of thing. So I had that background. And then when the internet happened, all of that became so much easier. Basically, any of us could do investigative journalism these days because of the resources available on the World Wide Web. I didn't have a particular interest in cancer until I was diagnosed in 2013. And at that time, I realized I had a lot to learn about my particular disease and about all of these factors that go into the etiology and the treatment and hopefully prevention. Once we're diagnosed, most of us can start doing things somewhat differently to reduce the probability that we'll have a recurrence of that disease. My wife, Julie, is a researcher in mind-body medicine. And she, through her network, was the person who connected me with my oncologist, Donald Lamb, in Scottsdale, Arizona, and also helped me immeasurably with understanding papers that were using language that I couldn't quite get my lay head around. So we've been very much a team on that front. And Don Lamb, too, last I looked, had published like 300 papers in peer-reviewed journals. Most recently, an article in Vaccine on the 100-year anniversary of the first clinical administration of BCG, the vaccine that we're using for bladder cancer now. So I've gotten together like this with Don and just asked him questions. He's been very generous sharing his resources and PowerPoints that he's delivered internationally over time. So it's been, I think, an exercise in what Bandura would call self-efficacy. If we're diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, and we have a sense, I can do something about this, and I'm willing to do something about this, we feel better than we would otherwise. And the data says we have better outcomes, less disease, less pain, et cetera, than we would if we weren't exercising that self-efficacy. So I think these different strings from my own past came together and produced this book.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's so rich. I'm so glad you were an investigative journalist in a previous portion of your life. You brought so much to the book. That. I wonder if you could share with us, what were your biggest joys and biggest challenges when you were writing the book, as well as when you were, bringing it to the public?
I think a challenge we probably already touched on, which is there's so much material out there. And every day, if you looked on PubMed, you'd see, 20, 30 new papers on cancer treatment, a lot of work being done now at the molecular level, genetic approaches to cancer prevention and treatment. So the field, like the disease itself, is exploding, and tracking what would be of most interest to readers, many of whom may be cancer patients themselves or know someone who's a cancer patient. So getting too technical probably would miss the mark, but not including some of this new information that we've gotten about the links between the way we live on the planet and the disease rates that we're experiencing would narrow the book too much. I didn't want it to be a book only about my experience of the disease. I wanted it to be more a description of many of our experiences of this disease. And since the book has come out, a number of readers have told me, it felt like you were writing this book for me, cancer patients. And when I heard that, I felt a great deal of joy and satisfaction that seemed to have accomplished what was the main thing I was setting out to do.
What a great feeling. And I can see that in the way that you write. You write very specifically about your own experience, very rich, deep and broad. And in a way, somehow being very personal makes it quite universal. It makes it very relatable, because we all have very personal experiences, just like yours that you shared with us.
I know since I was diagnosed, I've met a lot of people who are cancer patients, and they have quickly become amongst my favorite people. There's a realness to cancer patients. I remember after I got over the initial shock of diagnoses, then I started working on how do I live and die with a dread disease? How do you do this? And one of the first things I decided was, there's just no reason to behave anymore. For a long time, I thought, well, I have to follow the rules and be politically correct and acceptable and all that. And then all that just went out the door. I went, I may have a couple months to live. That might be it for me. So to hell with, behaving myself. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. And one of the things I wanted to do was write a book about my experience. So it's been one of the great gifts, the community that I've joined in this new status of being a cancer patient.
Yeah, yeah. I like you doing whatever you want, including writing a book. It kind of leads into my next question, maybe starts answering it and thinking about what were your your greatest lessons in this journey so far.
I think something I learned that I don't know I could have learned any other way was that I don't need anything to be happy. We grew up with, there were 7 kids and not a lot of money in the house. But there was a kind of mantra in the Minty family home, at least we have our health. Remember my mother saying that. And so I grew up with this sense, well, you don't need a lot of money or a lot of stuff. So long as you're healthy, then you can live well. And I didn't realize how that had gone into me until I was diagnosed and no longer had something that I'd had all of my life. I was a kind of unbelievably healthy child. Nothing ever went wrong. My siblings would fall like dominoes each flu season, or with measles or mumps or all of those things from the 1950s and 60s. But I just breezed along. And when I was diagnosed, I just initially completely denied it. Oh no, there must be an error. That can't be me. Because I'd so identified with this state that we call health. So in the course of the illness, I realized something that my mom realized when she was dying of liver cancer. She was about the age when she died that I was when I was diagnosed. My mom told me, cancer's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And at the time, I didn't understand what she was saying. But once I was diagnosed and then realized, gee, I had thought I needed to be healthy, to be happy. And now I'm realizing, no, I don't need anything. The structure of reality is happiness. That was a lesson that I don't know I could have learned any other way. Maybe intellectually, I might have understood that as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. Heaven is not somewhere else. This is what we're all doing. We're living in heaven. But I don't think I would have really translated that information to a lived experience until I accepted finally the fact that I had this disease. I could be dying. My life might end up being much shorter than the life that I had imagined. And then realized I was happy.
I feel like it's a good moment for a pause to just like let that fill the space. Those lessons cannot be bought, right? And they're the best ones of our life. So, have a little bit of tears, kind of just in my eyes.
You and I, Leigh, have talked a bit about how life throws us these challenges. And initially, we want to run away.
Yeah.
We want to say, no, not that challenge.
No, thank you.
That's the wrong challenge,
That's not for me.
That's right. And then if we're willing to embrace what life gives us, we realize the gift that is life and death. Mm-hmm. So I think the way we create emotional anguish for ourselves is refusing the gift. Mm-hmm. Saying that whatever that stressful or traumatic event is, that's not right. That's not for me. And as soon as we resist or push back against challenges that we're given, then we suffer emotionally. But if we don't push back, if we open to, in my own experience and working with a lot of folks with terminal and life-threatening illnesses, there the whole world opens up. there for the first time, maybe we can see what my mom saw. It's all just right. It's all a gift.
What a nice connection to have had the same realization that your mom had, at your own time, at your right timing.
When she first said that, I thought, is this the morphine talking, or is this some weird Catholic I want to suffer thing happening? I didn't understand it. And she knew that. She looked at me and she kind of grinned and said, yeah, it sounds crazy, but it's true. And that's what I would now say to anyone else who asked me about that. It sounds crazy. This is the best thing. This is the best gift. But it's true.
I like the sharing and the standing by it, even though it sounds crazy. It's a lot of wisdom there. Peace. If there were something in particular, or three things or a few things that you really would like others to take away from the book, what would those be? Maybe you've already shared with us, but maybe there's something else.
I would hope that they would take away encouragement. When we're told we have, cancer, Parkinson's, MS, any of these things that can kill us and perhaps will kill us if something else doesn't, we can feel very alone in that experience and very discouraged. Like me, most of us have an idea, I have time out there. And if I'm not getting around to living my life right now in the way that I'd really want to, doing what I would most want to be doing, I'll have time for that later. So I hope that sharing my story would encourage people on both sides that they're not alone. 1 in 2 of us will be diagnosed with cancer in our lifetime, and those numbers just keep going up. And then I think any of us can make that reset right now and say, I'm not going to put off doing the things that are most important to me, connecting with the people who are closest to me, doing the work in the world that I want to do. And the cancer diagnosis is a wake-up call. It's a little reminder. What we have is what's right here. There's no guarantee we'll ever have anything else. So I would hope that the book would encourage anyone facing this disease or not to carpe diem, to pick up the gift that is today and use it, and not be concerned about behaving oneself or doing what one is supposed to do or something, but really expressing who we are in this rarest of windows, which is a human life. This little span of years from birth to death that has never existed, will never exist again.
Yeah. Pick up the gift that is today, you said. I like that. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful to remind ourselves that it hasn't existed before and it will never exist again. I think we do just think we have time. Right? I think I have time. I think many of us feel like, we have time, and so wonderful to embrace today, what we have right now. Yeah. So what's next on your journey, Daniel?
Well, I just got back from a scan in Phoenix. I was clear. Be heading back down again about 6 months we're off of the 3-month check into the 6-month, which will become a 1-year check if I continue to be clear. We'll probably do a round of immunotherapy when I'm back in the spring in Phoenix. So it's 3 weeks of BCG installation in the bladder. And I also continue to pay attention to those lifestyle factors that we know promote the immune response. This might be another thing that I would encourage all of us to be doing, to consciously make those choices in terms of our life, our diet, exercise, mental wellness, and so forth, that strengthen the immune system. It's under unprecedented attack now on life on Earth. So I continue to look for ways to strengthen my own immune system and encourage others to do the same. Though I think it's also good to note that things like cigarette smoke and industrial solvents are considered triggers for bladder cancer, particularly in men. Well, I've never been a smoker, and I've never worked around industrial solvents. So we can't control anything. I think that's a good starting point. None of us can keep ourselves from a cancer diagnosis or any other life-threatening illness. But there are certainly things we can do to increase the probability that we'll remain well, or should we get sick, that we can partner with a treatment team and successfully treat the illness. So that's something I keep an eye on every day. And probably the main thing I keep my eye on is, what do I really want to be doing? I was diagnosed in 2013, so coming up on 8 years or so of my living with this illness. And I want to make sure that by this evening, I'll look back on today and say, that's what I would have wanted to be doing today. If I die tonight, I'll die content, knowing I got to talk with Leigh in the morning and got to see some patients in the afternoon.
That sounds great. Any other non-rule following, doing what Daniel wants, things in the works?
Well, I'm going to be bringing out my first book of poetry next year. I've been writing and publishing poetry most of my adult life, but have never done a book before. So it's called Forethought, and it's a look at reality before we think about reality. A lot of writing, a lot of poetry is one's thoughts about our experience of living and dying. But as the title suggests, I want to get at that prior experience before we think, oh, this is great, or we think, oh, this sucks or something. What is that? And have about 100 poems that will go into the book. And then also working on a book about dogs.
Oh.
I have traveled with the Dog Nation over time and thought I'd like to write a book that, perhaps in the spirit of Tropic of Cancer, tells a story about me and my dogs, but also pulls in what we now know about this relationship between canids and hominids that goes back a long, long way. So I've begun doing research on that book. And also, given that I currently don't have a dog, I'm in the market for a puppy because I think this puppy will probably have pride of place in the book. And that's a project I'm looking forward to bringing on. Maybe that'll be out 2023, something like that.
Great, great. Well, I look forward to reading more of your poems. I've appreciated getting a little tasting, and look forward to getting to read that. I'm glad you're sharing that with the world.
Also helping Nancy bring out her first book of poetry. That might be out maybe later this year or so. But she has a wonderful sense of the world and the possibilities of the world, what the world is that we're living in, but what the world could be that we might want to live in. So it'd be fun to help her bring out her first book. She's working on her second book of poetry now, she tells me. And I love to support people who have something they want to say and give them a platform in which to say that.
I love that. I see you helping people express themselves front, right, and center, all over the place. Mm-hmm. One of the many amazing qualities that you have. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed getting to spend this time with you and get even more richness of your life and your experience with cancer and your experience with writing The Tropic of Cancer. And I wonder if there's anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up today.
Well, just to thank you for your interest and your presence in my life. We do a lot of teaching together, and I learn something every time we sit down in a class or with all things CBT each week. So thank you for being you. And I hope that our understanding of integrative wellness is something we can continue to talk with each other about and with our colleagues and readers, students. This notion that physical health is this silo and mental health's over here in its own silo, I think now has pretty much gone by the wayside. And people who are looking closely are realizing, talking about mental health or physical health, they are distinct focuses, but they're looking at the same thing. So to be well, to live and to die well is cognitive, a behavioral, a political, a social, and I think at the very core, a passionate act. If we're living life very near the root of life, we're living life passionately, not in an indifferent or long-suffering kind of way. So some wonderful work being done by our colleagues on the integrative medicine front. And I hope that the work we're doing when it comes to psychotherapy can acknowledge and be informed by this larger picture of what it means to live and to die well.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Daniel.
You are welcome. Thank you, Leigh.
It's always a joy and pleasure to be with you.
I can't imagine better company.